Rick is a total brother. I love him so much. But I had this epiphany, because I've done MDMA a bunch of times, and I've done psilocybin a lot more. But I said, for me, MDMA inspires you to love other humans. You feel that's an empathogen. You really want to deal with another person and solve trauma. All that's wonderful. Psilocybin inspires you to love the universe. And I think that's the big difference between psilocybin and MDMA. So I think now we're at a time that we all know the Earth is in trouble. Common refrain from patients in clinical studies is the ineffable. I can't explain to you, doctor, what I experienced. And the patient looks at the doctor realizing they don't have a friggin' clue what I've just experienced. But the big wave right now with physicians and therapists is to make sure that they are all psychedelic. It exacerbates their anxiety, and so you now have a contrast of data against a polluted data set. Now, I'm rocking the boat here because there's 200 physicians that are on these clinical trials plus that are using niacin and these other placebos, and it's just fundamentally flawed. One of the things that I came up with long ago, and I really believe this is true, and especially for you younger people, I believe the biggest mistakes in science occur at the beginning of the decision tree. And then you have an alpha professor, oftentimes male, oftentimes white, who then bombastically tells you the way it is, and you can't challenge him for fear of being humiliated. And so you put your nose to the grindstone and you follow the conventional path. We need people who are challenging assumptions at all times. And so I think this is the problem. Now, with microdosing and a placebo, microdosing means you feel no effect. So a placebo could just be cellulose, and you take it. Well, a placebo study with a microdose makes sense. A placebo study with a macrodose treating a mental health issue does not make sense to me. And I want all the physicians here on this to carry this discussion forward. You know, I don't want to create an argument. I want to create a discussion for maximum patient outcome. But if we have a fundamentally flawed clinical design, then we retroactively discover that later. Millions of dollars have been wasted. Hundreds of patients, have been wasted in the effort. And then we may not be able to see the signals that we so desperately need.
And as a journalist, I can say that spotting flaws in an experimental design is really hard once the thing's been published, once it's out there. It's those experimental design is one of those like secret things that really we need to get much better at. And it's amazing how often there are problems with the experimental design. You said nature provides, you do not. And I'm curious, and I think that's a really good policy, but I'm curious if you have any thoughts or advice towards this, those who are policymakers and therapists who are trying to find best practices for therapy. If, even though you are not providing, but if you would give advice, what would you like to see that that therapy look like? What pieces need to be in there?
Okay, there's a lot of different elements in my answer here, so I'll just try to stay focused. Good luck. So for the therapists to have maximum benefit, they should be well trained. The CIIS, the Center for Integrative, the California Institute for Integrative Studies, excellent program. MAPS had a program for therapists I think was excellent. I hope they bring it back. So I think having these programs where people go through therapeutic training. I'm an advisor on the Washington State bill. I was an advisor on Measure 109. Also, I'm an advisor on several other groups right now. And in Measure 109, they never accounted for microdosing, which is crazy because it's not intoxicating. But the Washington State bill, I was surprised, requires 2,000 hours of training in psychedelic therapy.
I've got that.
That seems a little bit excessive to me. You know, that is an extraordinarily high bar. You have to have a commitment.
Yeah.
But I am encouraged that it's being looked upon so seriously. If we're going to have this medicine, we need to have really well-trained therapists. The majority of therapists are underground therapists. And these underground therapists are really leading the way. And they're self-policing. There's a lot of dialogue on that and getting better. They're very vulnerable because their patients can blackmail them if there's a negative outcome. So really, we're just molding this therapeutic, methodology now to bring it to the forefront. And here I may sound like a total conservative to you very liberal people, but I think the majority of us pay a shitload in taxes. And the underground psilocybin movement is not paying taxes. And if their house catches on fire, they call the fire department. So let's get real. If you're growing psilocybin mushrooms and you're making money, you should be contributing 30% of your profits to society, to a nonprofit, to some other organization, to the fire department. We don't want to have freeloaders wrapping themselves in the spiritual psychedelia, saying they're doing this for the good of the people when they're actually getting a lot of money and they're not paying their fair share. So I'm sorry I'm conservative on this, but I do believe this because we do need guardrails, and the guardrails is to ensure purity and non-toxicity. Many growers here, you know what I'm talking about. You got bacterial blotch on your mushrooms. You get verticillium. You get mycogeny. You've got mushrooms that are being parasitized by other organisms that are producing endospores. I'm talking to the people who know this subject well. Your humidity is too high, your evaporation rate is not right, you don't have too much air circulation, your crop is diseased. You're motivated to pick every single mushroom to make your weight in order to make your kilo, your pound, your ounce. Without you having controls, a lot of contaminated mushrooms are entering in to the therapeutic regimen, and the poor therapists don't know of the quality of their product. This is why there's a lot of excellent self-policing. I've been told by many therapists who are coming up the learning curve. This is why getting psilocybin mushrooms prior to sporulation is really important. Prepubescent mushrooms, prior to sporulation, you avoid at least one subset of potential allergenic reactions. So we need to have governmental controls. I believe when there's a commercial transaction, we need the government involved. That's why in Seattle, I love the ordinance. They decriminalize psilocybin for non-commercial use, which means anyone can use it. You could actually have a group of people all doing it together. And the city of Seattle will not enforce any law against you because there's no commercial transaction. Once you have commercial transactions, once you have a patient-doctor relationship, and now the entourage effect with psilocybin mushroom, I think, is better than psilocybin, the molecule, we need to have the guardrails and the controls to prevent people from having adverse reactions or even dying.
Last question. I was talking to a birder the other day, and he was talking about a bird watcher, one of the leading sort of bird watchers in the country, and he was talking about how there was a bird that was flying at his bird feeder, and he was noticing these details, these things that no one else would see, which was like the fraying of the feathers that showed that it was going in and out of a hole in a tree, and things like that, things you couldn't even imagine. And it's because he'd spent so much time looking at these birds. And I'm curious, when you look at a mushroom, psilocybin or otherwise, what are you seeing that we're not when you first pick it up?
Well, the nonprofit I created with my three other co-directors, we're called, is a Center for Ecological Consciousness, about a Ralph Metzner. It plays on the ecology of consciousness and the consciousness of ecology. Now, many of you know about my bee breakthrough for saving bees from colony collapse. I wrote an editorial for the New York Times, and I discovered, because I'm a beekeeper and a mushroom grower, that bees went to rotted logs, to the mycelium, for immunological benefit. I published in Nature Scientific Reports. To this day, is in the top 0.01% of all articles ever published in the Nature publication ecosystem. Nature Medicine, Nature Physics, you name it. And it's the reason being is we're able to reduce viruses in bees by putting these extracts from the mycelium of reishi into sugar water, and for 12 days, and after 12 days, viruses that were killing bees dropped, in one case, 45,000 to 1. Better than any pharmaceutical. So that's why that article has so much traction. You can look it up, extracts of polyphenol mushrooms reduce viruses in honeybees, Apis mellifera. I'm the primary first author. I got 20 patents on this. So I'm answering your question because that's ridiculous. I mean, I love to have the patents, but I got the patents because there was no prior art. No one in the world, and the patent office scanned Chinese, Japanese, Russian, you name it, every language, every data set. No one ever before me had discovered that bees go to mycelium for immune benefit. We all grew up with Winnie the Pooh. We all knew that bears would go into hollowed logs where there's bee nests. We are Neanderthals with nuclear weapons. So this is why the integration of disciplines and why the CEC, I'm so excited about it, we just got our 501(c)(3) status, is a Venn intersection of disciplines. We needed to get experts outside of their silos of discipline to cross over with other disciplines, because how many other examples are there out there? We have grown up and constant and evolved in a biomolecular universe that's constantly cross-talking. And yet we live in this isolated human forms thinking that we are a part of nature. We're actually part of nature, not a part of nature. So I think that, observing, being an ornithologist and being a tripster, I mean, when you're fully imbued with psilocybin, you stop. You know, and I have friends who've watched ants walk across, you know, the floor, or looking at something they've been stared at a million times and then see something different. So I think we need to get out of our comfort zones. We need to push the envelope, but we need to do it with grace, dignity, and most of all, with kindness. I really do believe that love is a universal constant of the universe. And this is, you know, we need to invest in loving each other and moving forward. And I know we're at the end, but I just want to bring out one really important message to all of you. There's an indigenous elder in British Columbia, a man who's the chief of his tribe, and horrible history of the abuse of indigenous, you know, people in all over the world, in this case in British Columbia, and a mother whose son or daughter was say, you know, he said, why should I take my indigenous kids to a Western school? They've abused us, they've exploited us, they don't understand us, they don't relate to nature in the same way that we do, they don't have the concept of 7 generations. And this elder said something very profound, and it brings tears to my eyes to be able to convey such wisdom that came from this indigenous elder. He says, because we need 2-eyed seeing. One eye with the principles of indigenous wisdom, and the other eye with Western technology. Your children need to go to a Western school so we can have 2-eyed seeing. Look it up. There is numerous articles in Psychology Today, etc. They give, you know, honors. These 2 elders actually have helped move this forward. It's building bridges between, you know, different cultures, and the whole concept that sure, all peoples develop technologies that we share. I went to Anchorage, you know, just before Christmas, the best First Nations museum I've ever seen in Anchorage. And at the end of this incredible display, I was pissed off that the Europeans thought that these indigenous people were not advanced in their technologies. Unfriggin' believable with their resource management. I saw a raincoat made from seal intestines. I mean, unbelievably transparent, repellent raincoat. I mean, of course, right? They use everything. But at the very end of the exhibit, it's very interesting to me. There was these Inuit, and they're hunting seals on their snowmobile with binoculars and a rifle. I go, okay, cultures borrow technologies from other cultures to enhance them. This is an example of 2-eyed seeing. And I just want to, we need to come up with examples of solutions that build bridges and not create divides. So I want to give a shout out, especially to Maria Sabina, Valentina Wasson, to Kit Skates, is these women who have really influenced my life more than anyone else in my life, is this wisdom of love and nurturing that's, I think, more inherent and focused within women because they give birth, they understand giving life. Us men, we're kind of 1 degree of separation away, you know? We don't see it in the same way, but I think it's really a time for women to rise up. We need women leaders.
Ladies and gentlemen,
thank you very much.
Hey everybody, thank you guys so much for coming out. If you guys can make your way out of the expo hall, out of the speaking hall here, we need to change over for the NTO Awards dinner at 8 o'clock. So if everybody can make their way out very quickly so these guys can get the table set up, I would super appreciate it. Thank you very much. Don't forget the Entheo Awards dinner is back here. If you have a VIP ticket, come on back for the Entheo Awards dinner. It's going to be something fantastic. Thank you very much. I really appreciate you guys moving out. Thank you.
Thanks for doing Sorry, that, man. I was here. Yeah, I was going to come. All right. Yo, thank you. You guys are doing a great job. Killer job.